All right, so it is the beginning of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you to everyone for joining us for the Global Dairy Farmers webinar on tackling heat stress. I'm Annie, and I work with VES-Artex, and I'm going to be your host today. So before we go ahead and get started and dive into the presentations, I'm first going to introduce our speakers, do one housekeeping item, and then I'll pass it on to Ed to do an introduction on GDF. So our first speaker today is Dr. Mike Wolf. He's a consulting veterinarian for VES-Artex. Dr. Mike Wolf has been a dairy practitioner since graduation from the University of Minnesota in 1979. He's been the owner of Country Doctors Veterinary Service since 1988 in Menominee, Wisconsin. And since 2007, he's had an increasing role as a consulting veterinarian for VES-Artex in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. This role has involved research in barn design, fresh air flow delivery, and cooling strategies in new and refurbished facilities. Studying airflow patterns with sectional velocity mapping and videotaping in multiple barn arrangements has led to improved ventilation designs. The success of these systems is reflected in improved production, reproduction, and animal health parameters with ROA to the dairy owner. And then our second presenter today is Dr. Juan Pedro Campillo. He's the Global Dairy Monitoring Technologies Marketing Manager at MSD Animal Health. Dr. Juan Pedro Campillo is a veterinarian who graduated from Alfonso X. El Sabio University in Spain with more than 10 years of experience in dairy cattle practice and a focus on dairy cattle reproduction and dairy herd management. In 2020, he joined MSD Animal Health as the Global Marketing Manager for Dairy Monitoring Technologies. So thank you both to them for joining us. And we will be taking questions throughout the presentation. So if you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A panel, which is at the bottom of your screen, and then we will address them at the end of the presentation. And with that, I'm going to pass it along to Ad, who's going to do a brief introduction on global dairy farmers.
Thank you, Annie. My name is Ad van Velde, dairy farmer in the Netherlands, and since 2017, president of Global Dairy Farmers. Global Dairy Farmers is a unique network of practicing dairy farmers from all over the world. Visionary, progressive, looks across borders, and positive. We always try to make the connection with dairy farmers. Why are certain dairy farmers successful and others less successful? We talk about this within GDF, but also together with our business partners. Being a member of GDF also means sharing visions, gaining inspirations from other members or from the congresses and events we organize. GDF membership is also part of modern entrepreneurship. The international dairy industry is moving. The sector is in the spotlight. In many countries, the number of dairy farmers is rapidly increasing. In my opinion, the time for cooperation is even more important than ever. And GDF plays a role in this cooperation. Cooperation between dairy farmers, business partners, and the whole dairy industry. Last week, I read an article in the Financial Times on flying with one engine, why global food supplies are at risk despite falling crop prices. The conclusion was basically that the whole food situation worldwide is very nervous, although it seems to be calming down a little bit. I've been in Argentina last week. Yield forecasts of soy and maize have been sharply estimated downwards, purely because of the drought. Why I'm telling this? There is just a strong relationship with a topic like heat stress on dairy farms, strange as it sounds. It has all a relationship with the worldwide food production. Optimal milk production, optimal feed to milk conversion is crucial everywhere in the world. There is a growing demand for food. It will remain. Farmers play the most important role in this. And if we talk about milk production, that can only happen with top dairy farmers or very well-run farms with top management. And tackling or manage heat stress is a part of it. I wish you all a very informative webinar.
Thank you so much, Ed. So with that, we'll pass it over to Dr. Mike Wolf, and he will begin his presentation.
Well, first, I want to thank Global Dairy Farmers Organization and VES-Artex for this opportunity to present you a real quick and short story on heat stress and its effect on the dairy animal. And having been in this industry for the past 44 years as a veterinarian, I've seen the huge changes that have gone on in the industry, and with the consolidation that's going on, that we have to be as best stewards of both our resources and focusing on the animal health and welfare also, and making sure that it remains a productive vocation for our dairy farmers around the world. So again, we're starting with this calf from the day it's born until the day it leaves as a healthy animal from the dairy. We're in a several year commitment to this animal. It's not like other industries where poultry, it may be 6 weeks, swine, maybe 6 months or a couple of years. But in the dairy industry, we have a long-term relationship with this animal, and it encumbers on us to take care of this animal in terms of its health and welfare to its entire productive life. So if you think about us versus a cow, that we're like a 100 watt light bulb is how much heat we're giving off on a daily basis, per hour. And the cow, she's 16 or better 100 watt light bulbs. It's like if you have a hair dryer that's running 24/7, 1500 watts or more being put out on an hourly basis. And this is the type of heat that these animals are producing at the production levels that they're capable of today, and even higher. So if you look at the different stressors that these animals see in a day, today we're talking primarily about heat stress, but there's also combinations of any one of these, several below that, between handling, stressing, overcrowding in their facilities, tissue trauma from different aspects in their environment, different things going on inside the gut because of feed sources, other stressors that are causing variations in feed intake, mycotoxins that can have direct effects on the animal, and just how animals are fed consistently can have a roller coaster effect on what goes on internally on that animal. And so anything that we can do to smooth out and reduce the variations in the intensities of those stressors is always an important thing to strive for. So we'll start first with milk yield and lying times. It's highly been studied, looking at how the impact of as the THI goes up, the temperature humidity index goes up, that the milk yield will start dropping approximately in the upper 60s here on the THI chart. And so that can create a significant amount of milk drop, and all the other physiologic effects that heat stress has. That milk yield is one of the more immediate ones that we'll see, and will get us excited about that. Maybe we should be doing something about this environment that the animal is placed in. Again, looking at lying times, which has a huge impact on the milk production. That the more the cow lies during her day, time management, the more milk she produces, because she's not diverting blood into her muscles for standing. It's actually able to flow to the udder and bring those nutrients that turn into high quality milk. So again, as we reduce lying time, we end up with increasing standing times, and for those animals trying to keep cool. So again, anything we can do to mitigate those heat stress effects, to have her in a very comfortable, cooled environment, and make sure we're getting airflow on them as they're lying in their beds, and not just ventilating the barn. We are focusing on ventilating the cow at her level at 2 meters or less. The other thing that happens when these animals are heat stressed, they start mobilizing fat reserves, which again takes away from resources And we see some issues with foot health, with losing the digital pad, which again, there's other downstream effects that come with heat stress beyond just milk production loss. Again, here's the core body temperature relationship. We can see as these animals, as far as the amount of cows that are standing increases as that temperature rises above the approximately 39 degrees Celsius, these animals will start standing more in order to accommodate for that. And so that type of behavior is another indication of when we go into barns to see what percentage of cows are standing when we have a hotter event going on. So if we look at our next high visibility impact is on reproduction. So again, there's been studies done that it doesn't take very much increase in uterine temperature to actually have a significant reduction in conception rate. So in this case here, they're looking at 0.5 degree Celsius as having a 7% reduction in conception just because of the heat stress at the time of the breeding. And the reason that is that during the early cell division stages here, and just in the first couple of days, probably up to day 5 at the most, there's a glycoprotein that's lacking to protect that embryo. Think of it as like an antifreeze, and therefore it causes early embryonic death that we don't even realize that the animal is pregnant, other than that they will show up again 21 days later. The other impact that comes with heat stress is even the ova that are on the ovary developing in the last 45 to 60 days under heat stress, they are going to be poor quality, the same as what effects are if the bull semen, if that's not stored in a semen tank and the bull kept cool that way, we're going to have effect on natural service breeding also from the male side of this equation. So we look at what I call the reproductive roller coaster. This is actually a client of mine from several years back before we got really going on better heat abatement, that during the winter months his repro improves, and during the summer months they fall significantly. And so he rides this constant roller coaster because of not adequately cooling these cows. And so we also drive cows to become anestrous, and they don't start cycling again well until we get into the fall, mid to late fall in temperate type climates, for them to start bringing up healthy follicles again and improving the reproduction of the herd. Again, the other thing this costs is long days open, which cause cows to get overconditioned. That puts them at higher risk for transition problems if they do get eventually pregnant, as well as the cost of a day open on cows is probably $10, however that converts to your local currency, but it's a significant cost the longer that those animals stay open beyond a certain reasonable level of days in milk. And then the effects of those cows not getting pregnant puts pressure on our transition facilities. So this is from the same dairy. We can see that the gaps in calvings late winter, early spring are not there. So that's going to have an impact on his cash flow and calving flow. In the summer, when's the worst time to overstock pens for transition cows, we're putting more animals into that system than maybe it can handle. And the other thing, if we look at the red bars down below here in both these summer cases, we have an uptick on the heifers that are freshening from 2 years ago that are also pushing this pressure up on that transition facility. So again, any system, the better we can smooth out that flow, makes the whole thing work so much better if we have more of an even flow through that. And then this all puts the animal at higher risk for DAs, ketosis, RPs, all those transition health concerns. And it puts cows that are carrying twins at higher risk, and we end up with higher culling losses because of that. So here's an important one that's often overlooked, is the immune system. And if we look at the what's called leaky gut, that under stress, there's we consider one of these little can areas here to be a cell, and there's only one cell thickness between what's inside the lumen of the intestine versus the bloodstream capillaries inside the body, that under stress, the gap between these cells actually starts to come apart. It pulls apart. There's actually little muscle cells here that are involved with this leaky gut syndrome. It pulls apart and it lets chemicals and potentially even bacteria to enter into the bloodstream. of the animal, and that triggers a huge immune response. In mammals in general, the 70% of the immune system is located in the intestines. So that's a huge draw on resources, and that's where they found that the glucose that's missing during heat stress is actually going to the immune system, is where that's being consumed, and therefore it's not available there for the liver to do the things it needs to do, or for the udder to produce milk. So it's a huge impact of what's going silently internally on these animals when they're under heat stress. And if we look at the metabolic priority, the brain is number one, that the body's going to make sure that it gets the first priority in terms of resources. Again, that's glucose. But right behind it, you can see the immune system is sitting there needing its requirements, because if it doesn't protect the body from what's on the outside coming in, we lose the whole system. And then further down the list is reproduction, lactation, and so on, have a lesser priority. And that's why those things are compromised or given up in terms of to try and preserve the brain and the immune system. So when we look at a parlor holding pen, which everybody has if you're milking cows to some degree, how intensely we cool these cows in those environments is hugely important to keep them in a more thermal neutral zone that we can. And that's why the fan setups in these facilities are tighter together, both in lateral and distance between them. And we want to add soaking to these facilities to make sure that we're soaking those cows so that we can evaporate that heat off. That compared to a freestall barn, per square foot of space here, because these cows are packed together, there's over six times the amount of heat being produced per square foot of space compared to the barn. And also there's 6 times more BTUs or energy units being produced in a tight spot, and the cows are close together. Think if you were in an elevator real close to people, how uncomfortable that is, and how if you're touching people, you can't radiate heat away from yourself, and you're actually getting heat from them. So it's a net zero in terms of getting rid of heat. And so that's why it's a hugely important place. And this is where you could be losing pregnancies, even if you're doing a fair job of cooling the cows in the free stall or the pack barn or whatever your facility is. So again, there's a high correlation that's been studied, and we've known for a while that the breaths per minute here is highly correlated to what the rectal temperature is here. So as that breaths per minute goes up, you can have a fairly good indication of what the core body temps of your cows are. And that's where I like to use just monitoring your cows as they're coming into the parlor, that the first ones coming in to be milked should reflect what your barn system is, as whether those animals are heat stressed or not. As we go further into the milking time, those cows in the middle, if we're heating them up beyond what the first cows were, then we know we're not doing a good job of cooling those cows, while they're standing there to be milked, that maybe it's too long or we're not aggressive enough with soaking and airflow. And then lastly, to see how that last third of the animals, how well they're coming into rebuilding even further because of the conditions that they're under. So that respiratory rate's a real easy one to do without having higher technology. But again, with what Dr. Juan's going to be talking about here shortly, is going to bring some exciting adaptations to how we can even use that potentially of managing our cooling systems. So again, air velocity over these cows after they're soaked is quite important. So if you look at this cows that for less than a half a meter per second, these cows were wet, and you can see that the cows that were wet actually warmed up because they had a thermal blanket put on them that's really not getting evaporated off those cows. Where the cows that are at 1 meter per second or more, they tend to out here to about 7 minutes of time that they're keeping themselves cool. But if we dry them off too quickly, then the cows that have higher airspeed will need to be re-soaked sooner, where you get a little bit more extension on that cooling system if the airspeeds aren't overly excessive. So there's a balance of how these systems are all put together to optimize them, to make sure we're getting the best conditions for the animal and optimize it for the cost of operation. So again, here's some technology that's been used for a long time here in terms of soakers at the feed rail. This setup has the soakers coming onto the cow's back. We do not want that soaking water to run over the backside of that cow and over the udder. So we want it to be from the withers to the hooks area, and to have that run for a minute, maybe a minute and a half at the most, and it would rotate around the pen based on some standards that we won't get in today as far as how often those should cycle along with airflow over these cows. To the right, this is a newer technology that's coming on. This is actually an individual soaker system. Rather than having all this water being sprayed out when there's no cows here on a time basis, this will sense that the cows here, there's an ultrasonic sensor here that can see the cow here. And this is always activated with water. There's a valve, a solenoid valve that activates and will soak that cow when she's in this zone where this soaker is. This is going to be, I think, a huge benefit for water savings in those areas where that's a real precious element. And the other is in robot barns where putting feedline soakers is not very practical, and putting them elsewhere in the barn just makes cows kind of bunch in one place. And another place this could be placed is actually in the holding pen, looking down, so as cows clear that area and there's no cows there, the soaking would stop and then would continue on through as cows come and go to fill or as the holding pen empties. So that's some quite exciting technology that's coming down the pipeline. So the just basic tenets of dairy ventilation here, we got to provide fresh air. That's our key number one kind of like anchor of what we need to do. And then along with that, we have to somehow actively help remove that heat from that facility to get the humidity and noxious gases out. And then some sort of cooling strategy, whether it's by a soaking system and or combined with high pressure fog, depending on the analysis of the climate, to use that sort of technology. And then we got to have that sufficient velocity to enhance that evaporative cooling. So anyway, when you want to work with some knowledgeable people in the industry when you're setting up your systems, historically I've been in places where the design was, well, how many fans fit on the wall is what the design parameter was. And so we found that that may not necessarily be the best use of resources. So again, work with people that are knowledgeable in the industry to give you the best advice for your cooling strategy. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for your time and hope this short little bit of story of cow cooling and the ramifications on the cow is helpful for you today. So I'll turn it over back to Amy. Annie.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wolf. So while we're transitioning presentations, next up is Dr. Juan Pedro Campillo with MSD.
So hello everybody. Can you see my screen with my presentation right? Good, let me take out this. So hello everybody. Thanks for joining to this session. First, let me thank the Global Dairy Farmer Association for inviting me for talking about heat stress. In the next 20 minutes, I am going to introduce you a new way for control heat stress in dairy farms. My name, as it was presented by Annie, is Juan Pedro Campillo, and I'm a Spanish veterinarian. So as you can imagine, in Spain, we have suffering from heat stress because it's a very warm country. So I suffer on my own farms all of this impact. So moving forward, let me see. I wanted to start with this slide. Most of the thing has been covered by Dr. Wolf, excellent presentation, but I wanted to put an idea when I saw this slide. So most of the time we speak and we see correctly the impact of heat stress in terms of profitability, in terms of animal performance. So how it's affect the reproduction, how it's affecting the milk production, etc. But we cannot miss the part that how it's affecting the feelings of the animal, how it's affecting the behavior of the animal, the natural living of the animal, and finally the animal welfare. And this is important because what I'm going to present today is very correlated with the behavior of the cows. So that's keep in mind this idea because I will come back during the presentation. So I'm pretty sure that most of you, when you are thinking about mitigating heat stress, these images came to your mind. So cooling solutions. So we need cooling solutions for mitigating heat stress. And you are right. You are partially right. I mean, that's not the truth. But this only cooling solutions is the only way that, or just only with that I can control the heat stress. Well, look, I'm going to show you a video now of a farm that I used to manage in the past in Spain, where they were having implementation of or installation of some cooling solutions here. You can see this cow that is panting, and now you can see the fans on the milking parlor. And if you appreciate, these fans are not looking to the animal, are looking to the roof. So obviously I'm exaggerating, and this is not the normal thing. But what I'm trying to put in your mind is that if you want to control, you need to measure. So I love this sentence from Lord Kelvin. It's a mathematics. If you cannot measure, you cannot improve it. If you cannot measure, you cannot control. And that's why controlling is a combination of both things. This is a hypothetical example. Okay, I hope you see my mouse. Here is time over the day, okay, and this is percentage of group of cows. So the red surface is representing cows suffering from heat stress. I will explain later exactly how, but it's just keep the idea. So this is representing percentage of cows suffering from heat stress, and you can see that at 2 a.m. the cows were having almost 20% in heat stress, then go down, and then came back at 4, reaching 30%, enter into the milking parlor. You can see here the holding pen, and then they receive a cooling on these animals and decrease the percentage of cows that are suffering from heat stress. So if we see the whole day, okay, we can see that at 12 o'clock in the morning, PM, there were an increase of animals that were suffering from heat stress, and they were up to 45% probably. And this farm didn't activate the cooling until almost 4 o'clock. So what I'm trying to say is that this activation was late. And because I didn't measure, I was having for how many hours? 4 hours, the animals suffering from heat stress without activating. So the way to control or to mitigate the heat stress is the combination of cooling solutions plus measurement, plus understanding what is happening on the animals and when the animals are suffering from heat stress. If we focus in the measuring, it has been explained by the Dr. Wolf, the THI, the temperature and humidity index, is, I'm sure most of you knows and use this technique or this traditional system. I won't say that it's a bad system, it's a good system. However, you do not have the correlation with the animal. You do not have what is happening on the animal in the right moment. And then we have other systems like vaginal temperature, measuring of vaginal temperature, which normally are more for research, are not very feasible for commercial farms, are difficult to implement, and just you cannot measure all the animals, just sentinels. So these are techniques that are available, are useful, but there are some limitations. And what I wanted to present today is a new way of measuring or control heat stress. Is controlled by the usage of automated monitoring systems. And how does it work? What is this exactly automated monitoring systems? Maybe there are people that doesn't know, and it's the first time that they hear. So basically we start by adding a monitoring tag on the animal, on the ear, or in the ear, or in the neck. So these sensors, what they do is collecting the behavior of the animal, is identifying what is happening in the animal, which is the behavior. And by this collection of behavior, they are transforming to insights. They are sending to the monitoring system, transformed by internal algorithms, and display in insights in different devices. And one of the insights are, for example, percentage of animals that are panting, because one of the behaviors that the automated monitoring system, or some of them are measuring, are panting or heavy breathing. And why or how can I know that this panting or heavy breathing is correlated with heat stress? Well, first, I always like to show this slide where you can see the animal suffering from heat stress, and you can see several thermoregulation mechanisms that the cows has for taking out the heat, his body heat. One of these who has been already explained by Dr. Wolf, is the respiration rate. And panting can be correlated with respiration rate. So it's a way to measure in real time the heat stress on the animal. This is a study published in 2021. It's a case in study in my country, in Spain, where they divided the animals in two groups, ones that were suffering heat stress and other one weren't suffering heat stress. And we can see that the red line is the animals that were suffering from heat stress. There is increase on the behavior of heavy breathing. So these animals were having heavy breathing. However, if you see the ones that weren't suffering from heat stress, the line is almost flat. There is a little variation of the heavy breathing. So the heavy breathing is manifesting when animals are in heat stress. Another good example, or another good study, if you remember, I explained that vaginal temperature is a way to measure the heat stress in animals. Here is a study from Israel, Ron Bar, where correlate vaginal temperature with heavy breathing probability. And he demonstrated a very good correlation between vaginal temperature and heavy breathing, mentioning or saying that heavy breathing probability, or these automated sensors, can monitor and can measure the heat stress on animals, on individual animals. And what it is even not more important, but I like to show this graph. On your right, you can see that there is a correlation between the cooling duration and both techniques, or one is vaginal temperature and the other one is proportion of cows panting. So the line that is in black is vaginal temperature, and the other line, this one, is the proportion of cows that are panting. On the X side, you can see cooling duration. So 10 minutes from starting the cooling, 20 minutes from starting the cooling. And you can see that the behavior of the cows are changing faster than the temperature of the vaginal. Okay, so it means that it's very sensitive to the moment that the animal is reducing the heat stress from their body. So how this can help, and what are the ways that we can measure or we can control the heat stress? One of the ways is by daily group monitoring. So the system monitor a group and monitor in a whole day. During the whole day, you can see here is the time of the day, and you can see that the red surface is heavy breathing, okay? So we can see that at 2 p.m., we have at least almost 30% of the cows that were suffering from heavy breathing. At 5 p.m. was even crossing the 50%. So by having this access to this real-time information, I can make an immediate action. I can activate the suckers, or I can activate the fans. I will reduce the negative impact of the heat stress in the right moment, because I know that my cows are suffering on that specific moment. And obviously, by the way, I'm improving the animal welfare by not changing the behavior of the animal. This is a lovely case in California Valley. Okay, this was a farm that installed the sensors, and he started to measure the heat stress. In the beginning, he decided to turn off the suckers at night, so we can see 10 p.m. It's not very clear, it's a little bit blurred. So during the whole night, he was having the strategy to turn off the suckers. However, he realized that on that moment, the animals were suffering from heat stress. And what it is more important, if they are panting, they are not ruminating. They are not feeling well. So what this farmer made was to change the process and to allow the suckers still running during the night. And look what happened the day after. So the day after, while I was having 40% or almost 50% of the cows suffering from heat stress, the day after, by leaving the suckers running, I was almost 15%. Okay. And what it is more important, these purple surface are showing the rumination time. So my cows, as they were okay, they were ruminating. They were ready for producing milk. Another nice example is here in Israel, one of the farms that they realized, thanks to measuring, that they were having one of the cooling systems of the fans broken. And when they activated as the system didn't work, the animals were still suffering from heat stress over 50%. So thanks to that, the farmer made a decision and could realize what was happening on their farm. And they could reduce the impact of the heat stress after that. But it's not only daily measurement, it's also the trend. This system allows you to measure the trend, what is happening over the time or along the time in different months. Here we can see again a graph where we can see the whole year, and we can see instead of percentage of cows panting, what we are representing is minutes of the group panting, of heavy breathing. Sorry, because it's in Spanish. But basically what we can see is in Spain, winter is from January to June. And we can see that in these months, the behavior of the animals were almost nothing in heavy breathing. However, when it starts the summer, which is June, then I'm starting to have more and more minutes of panting of the group. And how this can help me? How can be this useful? Well, this can help me to evaluate the cooling strategy, to know if what we are implementing is impacting or not, is being positive for my herd or not, and then adapt my strategies accordingly. This is a good example. 2 farms in Israel. They are 5 kilometers far from each other. They are in the same conditions, suffering from the same environment. This was in 2020, in May 2020. We can see same dates from 2020, May 2020 to July 2020, same dates here in the other farm. And what we can realize is that farm number 1, their animals were having less minutes panting. So compared to the farm number 2, that we can see a higher numbers of minutes that the animal were panting. And not only that, also the rumination is lower compared to farm number 1. So what it's telling me is that, okay, if I see this graph, I can see, okay, my cooling strategy is not working, or at least it's not working as I want. I need to make decisions. I don't know which ones, but I can make it based on this information. So it's clear that farm 1 are implementing or is implementing a better strategy than farm 2, or has a better cooling solutions. So basically what I wanted to transmit to you in this talk is that automated monitoring solutions can help you to total control heat stress by measuring where it happened on the cows, knowing in real time how many or what's the percentage of cows that are suffering, based on making real-time decisions, mitigate the heat stress impact, by allowing me to know when I need to activate the anti-stress, allowing me to evaluate my strategies in the cooling protocols, optimizing my animal welfare, and what it is even more important, giving me peace of mind, because I know that I can control the heat stress, and I know that I can make decisions based on data, based on real insights. That's it. I just wanted to thank you again for listening, and happy to questions or whatever.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Campillo. So we are now going to move back to Ad, and he is going to say a few closing words to wrap us up, and then we will move on to questions. So again, if you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A panel, and we will address them momentarily.
Thank you, Annie. I will explain a little bit about all the activities what GDF will organize the coming months, coming year. After that, we have the discussion and question, and then I have some closing words as well. With GDF, we go to VES Bangkok, VES Asia Bangkok. It's a huge exhibition in Southeast Asia. We have a very close relationship with the VIV organization. It used to be pigs and poultry, but nowadays they are more focusing on dairy and aqua. And we organize there a seminar, and we give some presentations. And so maybe it's interesting for business partners as well. Yeah, there is happening a lot in Southeast Asia, and especially also on dairy. It's developing. It's a huge development. In June, I will go to the Merco Lactea in Uruguay. It is actually it is Argentina, an exhibition from Argentina, and now they have a 3-day event in Montevideo. I will be there, and we try to organize maybe a small trip around this Merco Lactea in Montevideo. October the same at the World Dairy Expo. With Global Dairy Farmers, we try to organize a small program with a few days farm visits, few days expo visit as well. Several webinars are in our pipeline. November, I go to VES Mea in Abu Dhabi. And we are also thinking about our main congress in March 24 in New Zealand. So this is a bit our lineup for the coming months. Back to you, Annie.
Okay, thank you so much. So we'll dive into questions. So the first one is for Dr. Wolf. What is a sufficient air velocity that you recommend in barns? Oh, Dr. Wolf, you're on mute.
How's this? Is this better?
Perfect.
Yes.
Anyway, generally we want to be above 1 meter per second is the minimum. In years past, the feeling was that once you got to 1 meter or 1 meter per second, you've arrived as far as a tunnel barn ventilation setup, and that's totally insufficient. That we found we have to be actually closer to the 2 meters per second, and maybe slightly above that in terms of trying to get the range. And it depends what type of barn design you have in terms of whether it's a powered tunnel ventilated barn, whether it's a cross ventilated barn, if it's a natural ventilated barn. All those things factor into how far fans of different sizes can be spaced apart in order to get that target velocity over these animals. So generally that 1 to 2 meters per second, and preferably toward the higher end of that, maybe 2 to 2.25 meters per second is our target. In really hot, humid climates, like in Southeast Asia, even in the Middle East, there's dairies like in Qatar where they get heat stress coming off the Persian Gulf, where they have high humidities and high temperatures during about 2 to 3 months of the year. So there we're looking at even higher velocities, because there is some benefit to be obtained from that. And it really gets into where you're located, and the is what's going to affect those design parameters. But it's just a rule of thumb to start with. We want to be definitely above 1 meter per second, and preferably closer to that 2 or better.
Great. So our next question is for Dr. Campillo. So you spoke a lot about monitoring heat stress. Do you have recommendations on reducing heat stress?
So this is a good question. So my recommendation is establish a very strong protocol, not waiting for letting the cows be in heat stress or suffering from heat stress. Try to establish protocols that allow you to keep all the time the cows, or most of the time, the cows below the threshold. And these protocols, I think Dr. Wolf has explained it, these are based in suckers and vans. I know there are some rules of the 3-3, which is three, I don't remember exactly, 3 minutes ventilation, 30 seconds of sucking. But the idea is by using the monitoring solutions, try to keep all these animals as far as you can below the threshold of 10% of suffering from heat stress. That's the goal, I think.
And a comment to add to what Juan had spoken there is in this technology to go forward, where we can actually, a lot of times we find the hottest part of the day to these cows is into the evening and early morning. And so if we run it just based on ambient temperature rather than what the cows are telling us, that if we can get where this is connected, where the cows are still panting, that means that soaker system, that fan velocity stays up there until those cows have gotten down to their basal level, back to their normal less than 39 Celsius, is hugely important, because they can tolerate the next day if they got back down to basal level. If they can't, they're carrying excess heat from the day before that's going to pile onto the heat. And that's why many times the second to third day is when the cows crash after they've had a continual heat event, because they're not getting that excess heat off them. So that's a huge possibility with this technology.
So now we have a question for Dr. Wolf. So aside from cooling systems, what are some of the best action steps that you can take for heat stress mitigation?
Besides cooling, in terms of just water and fans, is make sure you're not overcrowding cows. That make sure that they've because stocking density has a huge impact on the heat being produced in that facility, and how much of that has to get exhausted from that barn. We have many examples where the barn was designed for a certain set stocking density, and then it goes over and people say, my barn's not working anymore. And you go to find out that he has overstocked that barn. So that's one of the biggest factors is watching stocking densities in these barns. Other things is, fresh air is the biggest, and whether you're working with a natural ventilated system, starting from square one is how you orient your barn to what your winds are coming from, during the heat months, so that you're getting fresh air coming across the natural ventilated barn, so it'll properly ventilate in combination with some recirculating fans and soakers as a baseline. But again, if that barn is oriented improperly, sometimes when we build new buildings, we build shadows that create issues for an existing barn. So a lot of foresight is what we try to put into a facility going into it, to say, what are the factors here where lagoons, where trees are, they're going to block wind flow. We look at it from a high elevation and zero into that barn to see, are we setting this barn up for success? And that's what drives many times the guys to power ventilated barns, where they take the mother nature effect out of here to a certain degree. I don't have the hubris to say we're ever going to be more powerful than she is, but it helps to mitigate those factors if we take more control of the barn environment.
Dr. Wolf, one stupid question. How do you say, so giving access to fresh water to the cows is for me
huge.
Also very critical.
Yeah. Yes.
How do you see put saddles on the place that the cows are drinking? It's helping to keep the water a little bit fresh.
To put what? I misunderstood.
Saddles like to ensure that the sun is not
yeah, shade.
Shadow. Yeah.
Yes, shade, hugely important, to mitigate solar gain into that barn, and that can be either with shade cloth or curtains of sometimes to block the solar. And again, it goes back to, if you're in the step of building a barn, you orient it to mitigate that to the best you can. And most times in most locations, that's an east-west orientation is optimal to reduce that solar gain. And then going back to water too, the availability of water. And when I go into dairies and see, are cows, when it's hot, do you have what I call water hoarders, where cows are standing at the water because they want to own that spot. They don't want to leave because either it's insufficient or there's never enough water space for every cow. And if you get dominant cows hogging the water, there's a lot of subordinate cows that may have potential for great milk production, but they're not getting access to fresh water. So that's hugely important. And having it, they can drink up to 50% of their daily water after a milking session when they're really being driven by that thirst. So again, back to that fresh water. And I always say we get the behavior from cows we promote. So if you do something that enhances one area to be cooler than another, the cows will gravitate to that spot. And I've seen where people have put like fans, like say over the water. Well, that's a great idea trying to cool the cows, but it draws cows to come and stand there, and it congests that spot. And we want the cow to come get her drink and then go lie down preferably, or go and eat in a more where the air is moving better and she can get cool there. But we don't want her tying up real estate, for just because there's a fan hanging in the wrong place.
So a question for either of you. Has the economical loss due to heat stress been calculated on a dairy farm?
I think there's a lot of macro studies been done on that. And again, it's quite particular to the area that you're in. And that's something that if you want to, send something along to us that we could take a look at based on where you are, because that can be, quite variable. I mean, that small chart that I showed you of how much that 3 kilos of going from, 68 THI, up to into almost 80, is 3 kilos of milk. And some of those basic things have been pretty well analyzed by economists in the dairy industry. The payback is huge. The investment in proper cooling that's specific for where you are is such a relatively easy payback that it almost becomes a no-brainer when you really look at it in terms of the payback return. But again, it's got to be balanced. Like I say, more fans on the wall is not the answer. It's got to be designed for your specific location and the challenges of where your dairy is located.
From my point of view, completely agree with Dr. Wolf. And I mean, there are plenty of studies that they shows the impact, economical impact of the heat stress. I'm going to tell my own experience, which is one of the farms that I use to give advice here in Spain. When the first time that I entered into that farm, it was in July, so beginning of summer here. They lost, my first year that I was there, they lost 10 kilos of milk in a month. So they were producing 37, and I will never forget, they go down up to 27. So the year after, they started to invest in some cooling solutions, and they improve. So instead of losing 10 kilos, they lost less than 5 kilos. So if you make the count, it was huge, the ROI. If you control this and make decision based on what is happening, then you are optimizing all of your cooling strategy. So the ROI is very, very clear here in Spain. There is no doubt. Just only milk production. Okay, I'm not speaking about reproduction, which is also it can be measured very well how improving the heat stress impact in the economy of the farm.
Our next question is for Dr. Campillo. What is the relationship between the time at the incidence of heat stress and drop in milk production during the day? Has it been defined by you? Meaning, if the cows undergo heat stress between 12 and 14, even though the fans are turned on afterwards, will there still be a drop in milk production?
So I don't know exactly. I haven't checked it by hours if affecting at night or in the middle of the day how it's affecting. What it is a clear point is that if the cows are panting, if the cows are suffering from heat stress, the cows are not going to eat. I think Dr. Wolf explained it well. The cows are wasting their energy to take out the extra temperature that they have in the body instead of going through doing their own behavior and doing producing milk. So it is clear that as long as I have my animals in suffering from heat stress and in panting, they are wasting their time, they're wasting their energy on taking out instead of producing milk. So I don't know the hours, but it's a correlation has been made in plenty of studies, and it's a clear correlation.
Question for Dr. Wolf. So you spoke about how heat stress has an impact on milk production. Does it also have an impact on components such as fat or protein, and how do we solve this issue?
Absolutely. When that cow is under heat stress, she stops eating because, again, she's diverting all of this energy to try and keep cool. And as I explained earlier, the immune system is sucking a lot of energy, from this system, so it's not there available to make milk. And you think, well, that would drive dry matter intake, but that cow has to convert from where she normally is ingesting feed that's digested in the rumen and the different elements that come out of the rumen fermentation that are part of her energy cycle, because the body's switching to glucose. It's saying, I want glucose, this other stuff that you're taking to make milk fat and other things. It's like, there's no time for that right now. So it actually shuts that down. Now we have the cow, as he showed with ruminations, that she's not chewing her cud, so she's not processing that forage. And the forage is a big part of what drives our, because the substance that comes off of forage digestion drives milk fat. And so that whole interconnection is what's driven down by letting this cow go into heat stress. So that's what trying to mitigate it some by trying to add extra buffers, because she's not chewing her cud as much. She's breathing off CO2 because she's panting. So she's actually blowing off more CO2 than she could in terms of her blood physiology is getting changed because of that. And you end up with, the ruminal and hindgut acidosis going on. And so you can mitigate that some by giving buffers. Some folks will add like the potassium chloride to the diets. Taking your diet and make it more energy dense is another way to get them through this period, but that has to be careful that you don't either add too much fat that's going to foul up your fiber digestion, or that you end up with an excess amount of grains trying to make up that energy, which is going to put your risk up for acidosis also. So it's a very fine line, and we're trying to mitigate it by feeding right, which can help you through that, but setting that basis of a good ventilation and cooling system so we don't get her into that point of that sort of distress is a far better foundation than additives will, which aid. I'm not taking away from that, but the foundation has to be there. And we know that we're never going to be able to completely, unless you air condition the barn and make that that sort of environment. Our goal is to mitigate, the intensity of the heat stress on the animal to the best we can, the duration that's going to go on, and make it operate fully so we get her back down again to that basal level. Is our goal in any sort of ventilation and cooling strategy.
I think we've got time for one more question before we wrap up. So this is for Dr. Campillo. So we spoke about collars and ear sensors and how they give us data or connect with your system to tell us about the the heat stress, and that's clearly quite an innovation. So connection with climate control could be another innovation coming. Are there any more innovations on the way, such as something to do maybe with feed additives added to the ration, seeing if they have an effect on heat stress, for example?
So, very good question. I mean, I think I'm not very focused on nutritional companies, but I see that every year there are new innovations, there are new products that are bringing to the market, also in the nutrition, in the additives that are for sure mitigating and helping to control better the heat stress. So I don't remember exactly now which one, but there are companies investing on that. This is, at the end, this is one of the most challenging aspects or issues for a dairy farm. So most of the companies are working to bring new solutions and to try to help farmers to control better the heat stress. So I'm sure there are. I'm not familiar exactly now with the name, but I'm sure there are.
Perfect. Well, with that, I will turn it back to Ad to wrap us up.
Thank you, Annie. A special thanks to Dr. Wolf and Dr. Campillo for their contribution. I think we can look back to a quality webinar. Thanks for our partners, VES-Artex and MSD Animal Health, also for their contribution. And a special word of thanks to Annie, Boukje and Lidi for the preparations and all the technical things. Many thanks to the participants. We had a nice group, a nice international group, a lot of participants from different continents, different countries. If there are any questions or comments about GDF, please contact us. And yeah, I'm wishing everyone a nice day or a nice evening. So see you soon. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Bye.